Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Nichols, GuideStar's Senior Director of Marketing and Communications, and I am pleased to welcome you to our final impact call of 2014. We have a special announcement planned today, as well as reporting our operational, programmatic, and financial results for the third quarter. And we're really thrilled to see that many of you on the call today joined us in May and August. So once again, thanks for joining us. And for those first-timers, welcome. For those of you new to this type of call, this is our attempt to evolve the definition of transparency and get you our results in a more timely and comprehensive manner. We also want this to be interactive, so we hope you'll have lots of questions for us, and we have a lot of time at the end saved for that. Before I introduce our first speaker, I just want to run through a very few housekeeping items. The first is we are live tweeting during today's presentation using the hashtag GSImpactCall, so we hope you can join our conversation on Twitter. Secondly, as mentioned, we're happy to take questions from all of you during the discussion today. You can submit questions via Twitter or using the chat box in WebEx. And finally, we will send all of you an email with today's PowerPoint and recording of this live presentation in a few days. You can also find the recordings of all of our impact calls at npo.gs/webinararchivesgs. So without further ado, I'm thrilled to introduce Jacob Harold, GuideStar's President and CEO. Jacob, it's all yours.
Terrific. Many thanks, Lindsay, and welcome everyone to this impact call, our fourth of the year and the last one for this year, but we do plan on continuing this into next year. It's been quite an experiment for us in how we communicate what's happening at GuideStar with our broader community. I'm going to, in a moment, hand it over to our special guest speaker, but I'll just flag that I'll spend some time presenting GuideStar's programmatic results for the third quarter, a bit on our Q4 plans, and then we also will have our finances reviewed by GuideStar's Chief Financial Officer, James Loan. And a reminder that throughout this, please suggest questions, and we will get to as many as we can after our brief presentations are complete. So first, on to the special announcement. So as we've discussed in past impact calls, earlier this year, GuideStar launched our strategic plan, which we call GuideStar 2020, Building the Scaffolding of Social Change, which is available on our website. And we continue to welcome feedback on it. And it's a document that we've used to chart our path going forward, to try to be clear to our broader community the role that we see ourselves playing in the nonprofit sector going forward. And it's quite an ambitious document, so ambitious that as we've run the numbers to try and understand what it will take for us to actually pull this off, we've calculated that we need approximately $10 million in philanthropic capital to support the transformation that is laid out in this document. And for that reason, I'm very, very glad to introduce our guest speaker, Victoria Rana of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who will share a bit that relates directly to our plans to help transform GuideStar, and with it, we hope to better serve the broader nonprofit community and the people in the communities and ecosystems that nonprofits serve. So with that, Vic.
So thanks for having me here today. It's really fun to be here in person with you guys to announce this, and totally appropriate to announce it on the impact call, since I think it's in support of transparency for the sector as a whole, really. So today, the news I'd like to share is that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is pleased to announce a $3 million investment in GuideStar over the next 3 years in support of the vision and plan for 2020 to really significantly upgrade and expand the information on nonprofits that GuideStar provides. We believe that time has come in our sector to move beyond using basic validity and transparency information to really building a robust system to share insight that drives performance, that improves the results we're getting for the people we care about and the causes we care about. GuideStar is well positioned to be at the center of that transformation. For the last 20 years, GuideStar has been one of the few central providers of information for the sector, and it's the kind of information that's essential to everyone in the sector, to donors, to nonprofit leaders, to policymakers, and more. It really has the in-depth experience, the brand, and over 100 distribution partnerships, incredibly entrepreneurial team and leader, And I want to go back to the distribution partnerships, because I think that what we're talking about here is a system. And what GuideStar knows is that it can't just have the information and expect everybody to come get it. It knows that it needs to get it out there at the fingertips of people when they're making decisions, where they're making decisions, and GuideStar has already laid the groundwork for that and can take it a lot further in the next 3 years. Upgrading the system for data and information, it's a huge task, and it can't be solved by any one organization. And again, GuideStar really understands this. It has deep relationships with other players in the sector, Foundation Center, Global Giving, Texas Global, the list goes on and on. And, you know, many of those organizations are involved in the Markets for Good community and that kind of point of collaboration and intersection, because this is beyond one organization. It's really for the public good and for the good of our sector as a whole. So in that spirit, we sincerely hope others will join us in supporting this campaign. As you heard, Jacob, this is a $10 million campaign at least, and you know, $3 million starts the campaign. But we hope others will join, not just with financial support, but with partnership and with goodwill, because this is something, again, that we think benefits all actors in the sector. So, again, super excited to announce this news, and happy to answer questions about it as we go along. And I'll turn it back over to Jacob to talk about the results for the quarter.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Vic, for that. And, of course, thanks on behalf of all of GuideStar for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's immense financial support, but more than that, intellectual support, emotional support in the work that we do, and in helping to build this broader community that we all know we need. We can't do this alone. For that reason, we are continuing to think about how we're part of a community ourselves. And our hope is that that broad community, including the philanthropic community, will help us with the remaining $7 million. But we sure feel great about this first tranche of this broader campaign. And for all of you on the phone, you'll get a chance to ask Vic any questions you may have in just a moment. But with that, let me transition on to the core part of the impact call, which is our results reporting on the previous quarter. I'll start out with programmatic results, which is to say our results against our mission. And then James will talk through our financial results. We'll share a lesson learned and then go right into the broader conversation. I'll note that we had 3 major launches in the last quarter that are worth highlighting. So the first one is we launched a new membership program, which is designed explicitly for foundations to ensure that they're able to make use of GuideStar's tools in a way that's appropriate for their particular needs, and also helps us to support our work. And we encourage any foundations that are on the call who are not already members to look into the GuideStar Foundation membership program. We also launched the second letter in the Overhead Myth campaign, which is designed to move the broader nonprofit sector away from a focus on financial ratios as a proxy for performance, because anyone who works in a nonprofit recognizes that financial ratios can at times be a useful indicator of some questions, but they tell you nothing about whether or not a nonprofit is actually creating positive impact in the world. And this letter, like the first one, was written and co-signed in partnership with the CEOs of Charity Navigator and the Better Business Bureau Wise Giving Alliance. And in this case, we focus on the things that nonprofits need to do to help us move beyond this overhead myth towards a conversation about nonprofit performance that's really about performance and really about results. Then thirdly, we were pleased to announce another partnership with an organization called D5 that works to advance diversity and inclusion across philanthropy, and then Green 2.0 that works to do the same thing but focused in particular on the environmental community. And they came to us and essentially asked, how can we use GuideStar's platform as a mechanism for collecting data about the demographics of nonprofit staff, boards, and volunteers? And so we were very pleased to launch that a couple of weeks ago and begin to really deeply integrate that into the GuideStar Exchange. So it's been a very busy quarter for us programmatically. Quantitatively, I'll now share a few of our metrics and results from the previous quarter. We were very pleased to see some quite robust growth in the participation in the GuideStar Exchange. which has now reached approximately 40,000 nonprofit organizations. And especially to see 17% growth among our gold participants. Slight decrease among silver, but that's mostly from organizations moving from silver to gold. And then also here, there's not just a question of the number that are participants at one of the seal levels or participation levels, but also how often is a nonprofit updating its profile. And that's where this final row, the profile update ratio, comes in. And we're very pleased to see growth there as well. And you see we're now at 23%. Now this is a quarterly number, and 23 times 4 is 92. So you can see we're almost at 100%, which means that we're able to maintain pretty fresh data for those organizations that are in the GuideStar exchange. So we're very pleased to see steady growth here across these different kinds of metrics of how willingly nonprofits are sharing data through GuideStar. Now, for us to get to our goal of 200,000 by the end of this plan, we're going to have to accelerate this even further. And over the course of 2015, we have a number of initiatives to do just that. The second phase, the second page of programmatic metrics are our reach metrics. These are metrics that are indicators of how well we're able to get our data out into the world. We're very pleased with our growth in platform partners. So these are other organizations that are using our data on their platform. Now, Vic talked about this. This is where we push data out to users through a partner as opposed to people using our data on our website. So really robust growth there. That's mostly through the launch of new APIs or application programming interfaces. You'll see in our unique user number, that's up quarter over quarter over the last quarter, but down year over year. The reason for that was a technical glitch last year on Yahoo that led to a number of essentially phantom users coming from Yahoo. So we knew this was going to go down because we identified that unnatural bump that we got last year. So if you take out that glitch on Yahoo's end, and again, I'll emphasize that was not on our end, that was on Yahoo's end, then we do continue to have steady but modest growth in our total number of users. What's more exciting than the total number of users, which includes people who come to the site and just glance at something really quickly, is the third row, which is registered users, who are people who are willing to take a little bit more time, tell us a little bit about themselves, and who are looking for more data. And we're especially pleased to see the 30% growth year over year in the number of registered users. Total amount of data is relatively steady at about 2.5 billion pieces. And then on the final row is number of API hits, which you'll see also is down. This is down for other interesting reasons, which is that one of our big customers went out of business, and another one reduced their usage significantly. And in the first case, there's really nothing we can do about it when one of our partners goes out of business. But it is a reminder that we only succeed through the health of our partners. And so we're still very pleased at the sheer scale of API hits in the many, many millions. But it's a reminder that we have to pay attention not just to our own health, but to the organizations that are channels for our data. With that, I will hand it over to James to share our third quarter financial results.
Thank you, Jacob. First, a quick disclaimer. Our numbers are preliminary and unaudited, and historical results are not necessarily indicative of future results. And all forward-looking statements contain known and unknown risks that may result in future results that are materially different from the historical results. With that being said, I'd really like to thank Vic and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Obviously, their support goes a long way towards us succeeding in our mission. And because, quite frankly, GuideStar can't do it by ourselves. And even with the Gates Foundation, we're going to need more help beyond that as well. And we'll see that in some of the numbers. And I'd also like to thank all the people who've participated on our impact calls. This time around, we have people throughout the states, the continental United States, as well as Alaska who registered. And we also have people who registered from India, and also Ethiopia, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, Somalia, South Africa, Tanzania, and Togo. So GuideStar work really reaches far. And we're also conducting an impact survey to find out about how you use our data to fulfill your mission, and we have a link to that at the end of the presentation. I encourage you to follow up and let us know what you do with our data, okay? With that being said, I'll go into the financials, and I'll start off first by reviewing what our year-to-date revenue and expense outlook looks like. You'll see in the comparison between 2014 and 2013, in orange and blue respectively, that revenue has been down pretty much most quarters. Year-to-date, we're down about $500,000 in total across all revenue, whereas expenses are up $1.1 million across the quarters. Expenses have been going up steadily as we've been investing using our own capital in the strategic plan in advance of receiving transformational capital from Gates and hopefully other large foundations and supporters. Meanwhile, our investments have not translated to direct revenue results yet, and that's pretty much because, we came into this year thinking that it was going to be a growth year when in fact it's really been more of an investment year. And the investments have been in time, people, partnerships, expertise, infrastructure, and all those things take time to result in material results. So revenue's been basically holding steady, but it's going to take time to really move that needle. You can see that we're having programmatic results. We're having leading indicators that are turning positive, but as far as translating to dollars and cents, and the revenue is going to take a little bit longer, I think. Go to the next one. And you can see this directly tied to our bottom line performance, with expenses being greater than revenue for the last couple of quarters. Both cash flow and operating income are down significantly this year versus last year. Cash flow this year so far has been almost $1 million negative, and operating income has been change in unrestricted net assets has been similar, down $800,000. So you can see that there's a little bit of fluctuation on a quarterly basis, and that's partially due to timing and seasonality of results, as well as grants that have shifted from one quarter to the other. And in this kind of activity range, with this kind of volatility, then what we have to do is just try and make sure that all of our time horizons don't push our resources too much to the tipping point. So right now, cash in the bank stands at 1.5 months worth of operating cash, and that's why it's very important and very welcome for the additional capital that we receive from Gates, because that helps us invest in the future, whereas 1.5 months worth of cash doesn't really give you much leeway to do that. So it gives us a stable operating environment. We can continue to invest without waiting for immediate payback within 1.5 months on our investment. So that's very important. And then for our full year outlook, I forgot to point out that the previous financial results did not include the Gates money, the Gates grant yet. Okay, but with this announcement, they'll be giving us the money later on in the fourth quarter, which we actually received, and that will be reflected in our fourth quarter results, and then furthermore in 2015 and 2016. So the numbers that you've seen now do not reflect that. And in the fourth quarter, because of that coming in, we'll basically have a break-even quarter, cash flow and operating income. And then with the leading metrics that are starting to turn positive, then that should mean that in 2015, everything will start going positive. That's it.
Great. And I'll just add a couple of comments in terms of our finances. So, it really comes down to timing. And we actually talked about this on the last impact call, that there are different time horizons that things happen over. That the shifts that we've made, for example, in our website interface, which we've only just begun to make, took a full year to really bring on the right people, get them trained, align our new strategies, get new kinds of talent, et cetera, and then really execute. But we're already seeing some remarkable results. So, for example, we tweaked some of the details of our products pages and how we present some of GuideStar's products that are available for sale. And that led to a 54% increase in the number of people who purchased a product. If we're able to play that out through our e-commerce system and the sales that we do through our website, that immediately transforms our economic model. Similarly, we've made major shifts in what we call our direct sales team. So direct sales is when we have a GuideStar person actually talking to someone to arrange a sale, whereas e-commerce all happens through the website. And we've seen some very, very positive signs there as well. So we are quite confident that the overall trajectory is very, very positive. I will admit, we thought it was going to happen a little bit faster than it has. So that's a lesson for us in terms of timing. And yet another reason why the grant from the Gates Foundation is very well timed, and that it buys us just a little bit of extra time to be able to really play out these transformations that we've really only just begun over the last year and will be playing out over the course of 2015. But I will definitely admit that, you know, we understand what it's like to be a underfunded nonprofit. And for those of you in the audience who struggle with these questions on a day-to-day basis, trust us that we feel your pain, and that we're really pleased with the direction that we're heading. We think the data bears that out. But it's not easy, and it's been a great year for learning, and we go into 2015 with an immense amount of confidence about where our finances are heading. We obviously have an immense amount of confidence about where our overall programmatic strategy is heading, but it looks like the financial numbers are going to line up, even if a little bit later than we would have preferred. Finally, you know, we always try and offer a lesson, and I just offered one, but I'll offer another one, which is probably one that we'll offer again in the future because it's a lesson we all have to keep on learning, which is simply the lesson that partnerships take a whole lot of time and effort. You know, we mentioned a couple of our big launches in the last quarter around the diversity data initiative as well as the overhead myth. Both of those were in deep partnership with terrific organizations, and it is absolutely worth it when you run a partnership well. But we really are reminded of how it takes a lot of time. It also takes a lot of attention and emotional energy. So it's just a lesson that I think we all have to keep on learning, but it's one we need to keep on learning because partnership is so critical to the future of the nonprofit sector. And then finally, just looking ahead, we've got some pretty exciting things coming up in the fourth quarter. We've got Giving Tuesday coming up, which has really proven to be quite a cultural phenomenon. We will be doing some experiments around the launch of GuideStar Platinum, GuideStar Exchange Platinum, which we probably won't fully launch until 2015, but we're really starting to experiment with that over the course of this coming quarter, and then obviously the broader giving season. So it's an exciting time at GuideStar. You know, we still are aware of our own fragility as a sector, but the signs are really positive, and we're really looking forward to closing out this year, and in particular looking forward to 2015, when a lot of the investments that we've been making are going to really start paying off in a way that's evident to our broader community. So with that, let's shift over to the discussion. We'll take some questions from you all.
Great. We have a couple that have already come in, but anyone else who has a question, please feel free to submit a question via Twitter or the Q&A box on the bottom right-hand corner of WebEx. So the first question is, Victoria, you mentioned the importance of GuideStar's partnerships, and partnerships seems to be a theme throughout this presentation today. What kind of partnerships does GuideStar have, and how do you become a partner?
Sure. So, you know, those partnerships play out in a number of different levels. There are campaign-specific partnerships, which are some of the ones I've been talking about here. For example, our partnership with the Better Business Bureau-wide Giving Alliance and Charity Navigator that was very specific to the overhead myth. They made sense as partners for that particular question. And that's something that was really rooted in our existing relationships with those organizations. Same thing with the diversity initiative. There are other kinds of partnerships that are data input partnerships. So, for example, we had a partnership with BoardSource, which is the leading organization working on nonprofit governance to help us think about how we collect data about nonprofit governance. And that was very much on the data input side. Then there's data distribution. So Vic mentioned the more than 100 channel partners that we have, which is where our data shows up on another website. Now, in general, that's a commercial transaction. So usually those organizations will pay us the way Amazon.com does, for example, to have our data help to power something on their platform. And that's part of how we're able to pay the bills, is through those sort of partnerships. We've also come to realize we need a variety of different kinds of mechanisms that a partner can use to distribute data. And then there are other kinds of partnerships. For example, we think of the GuideStar Exchange as a partnership with the nonprofits that provide us data. And then we have a number of partners who give benefits to organizations that reach participation levels in the GuideStar Exchange. So there's a whole different range of partnerships. And actually, one thing we've been working on here is clarifying what are those categories of partnership, so that the many organizations that want to engage with us, we can offer them a menu of options. Vic, anything you want to add to that about partnership in the sector?
We definitely see our relationships with our grantees as partnerships. And, you know, it's really easy to use that word and to overuse that word. But I think, Jacob, you made the point earlier that partnerships take time and energy of all kinds and patience, and sometimes they slow you down.
Yep. You
know, there's a saying that if you want to go far, you go together. If you want to go fast, you go alone. Probably flipped, but so, you know, this is you're in the effort to go far. So we're pleased to be a partner, and as you said, for us, that's not just financial resources, but it's also any other resources we can bring to bear that you need, that are appropriate and that fit GuideStar's needs. So that's how we definitely see the relationship.
One other thing I'll mention about partnership is that, Vic's quote, which is an African proverb I love, and I think we all need to remember. There are times where speed is actually more important than distance. And in those cases, you may want to act alone. But, you know, we're in this for the long run, and so we really see partnership as a powerful tool for that. But, you know, this is a place where categorizing different types of partnerships becomes important because, for example, with GuideStar Exchange, we're able to get economies of scale and have 40,000 of these partnerships. Whereas another partnership, like the one that we've had with BoardSource, is completely unique. We'll never do one quite like that again, and so those take more time per partnership, but it can be worth it. But those times we can figure out how to standardize partnerships, it can really reduce the cost of making that happen.
Great. I have a very specific one for you, Victoria. Tell us more about the Bill and Melinda Gates' mission, the Foundation's mission, and do you engage in Canadian charities?
Canadian
Super specific.
That is a very specific question. So the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's mission and our belief is that all lives have equal value. That's really our vision. And so there are three main programmatic areas for the foundation, very big and broad. One is global health, another is global development, and the third is U.S. programs, which is primarily focused on education, although we also have a Pacific Northwest program, so we give where we're based. Getting close to Canada.
It's very there, yeah.
Pacific Northwest. So you can read a lot about the foundation on our website, gatesfoundation.org, and also our blog, Impatient Optimist, if you really want to get more texture from us and our partners about what we're doing. So almost all the questions about what we do programmatically you can really find on our site. But as far as Canadian charities, we do have partnerships with the Canadian government where we're making grants and charitable contributions overseas. Canada is not a place we directly support nonprofits, although there may be some organizations that are based in Canada that are working in priority geographies in other countries for us. I can't say specifically we make a lot of grants. But that reminds me that our grants data is available on through the Foundation Center's website, the reporting commitment. where we and a number of other large foundations are reporting in a consistent format on a regular basis. So it's a good place to find out more.
Yeah. They have an interactive tools as well that you can actually go through and look.
Exactly.
And so the same person had a follow-up for GuideStar. Would GuideStar consider partnerships with Canadian charities?
So it's a great question, and there is an organization in Canada whose name I'm blanking on right now that does have a database. Oh, Vic is writing it down. Oh, well, there is AJAH, A-J-A-H. There's another one, and I can't remember what it's called. Because the Canadian nonprofit sector is quite robust, and there's a lot, I think, that the U.S. can learn from the Canadian nonprofit sector as well as from many, many others. Right now, GuideStar is focused on nonprofits within the U.S. Given the close relationship between the American and Canadian economies, there's all sorts of overlap there that I think we could try and tap into. More broadly, though, down the road, we would dream of a information system for nonprofits that was global and not just focus on one country at a time. Getting there is going to take a long time. That's something that Vic's worked on, that many of us here at GuideStar have worked on. It's a multi-year project, but we've certainly had conversations with Canadian colleagues in the past, as well as colleagues in a dozen other countries, if not more. But we have to figure out what that really looks like, and the challenge is understanding what is common about the nonprofit experience across country borders and what's different, and that the category of nonprofit in Canada is pretty similar to what it is in the U.S. But that's not really true in a lot of other countries where nonprofit has a different meaning. My favorite example here is in China, there's a category called the Gongo, which is the government-organized non-governmental organization, which kind of sounds like an oxymoron, but actually in the context of the structure of the Canadian political and economic system, the Chinese, Canadian, and the Chinese political and economic system, it really makes sense. And so we have to figure out how to reflect that diversity, and that's why it's going to take a long time, but it's something we're certainly paying attention to.
Great. So here's a question that I'm going to read just as submitted, but I think we need to clarify actually what the question is. So will the Gates Foundation's support of GuideStar's not-for-profit rating leadership lead to a consolidation of the not-for-profit rating industry? So let's first clarify that we actually don't rate charities,
Right.
But your answer to that, will it lead to a consolidation of all these organizations that are infrastructure like GuideStar, I think is the question, really.
Yeah.
And I'll offer some thoughts, and then I'd be interested to hear what Vic has to say about this. And as Lindsay said, we at GuideStar do not do ratings ourselves. We will share others' ratings. But fundamentally, we're trying to let people make decisions based on a variety of different kinds of information and let people make their own choices. But what I will say is that in this question of partnership, there is an opportunity for a certain kind of consolidation. That the GuideStar Exchange as a data collection mechanism is already being used on many other platforms. So even though that doesn't mean that we acquired those partners or we didn't merge with them, but we did consolidate our systems and reduce waste and unnecessary redundancy so nonprofits can fill out a form once instead of having to do it dozens of times. So that's a form of consolidation. In the business world, when you hear about consolidation, it usually means mergers and acquisitions. And that could happen in the case of the nonprofit information infrastructure. And indeed, GuideStar has acquired 3 organizations or products in the last several years: Donor Edge, Philanthropedia, and Social Actions. I could talk about those if anyone wants. But we also are not, on a mission to go and gobble up other organizations. We simply are trying to figure out how do we arrange all of the energy and resources and talent in the nonprofit sector and in the nonprofit infrastructure in a way that helps people do their work. So we see partnership as a critical part of that. That may include a certain degree of consolidation in the sense of mergers and acquisitions, but that's not at the heart of what we're trying to do. Vic?
So, Jacob, you mentioned how right now that nonprofits have to fill out so many forms over and over again. And one of the things we see in the sector and the ecosystem for information are these inefficiencies that really hurt nonprofits the most in the end, where you're having to maintain information in so many different places and so many different inconsistent formats. So, I don't think there should be a consolidation of all information. There's not one central kind of place where everything should be. But at the same time, if you could imagine some hubs and some efficiencies that really the technology could get us there, where nonprofits put in their information once or twice, and then it goes out into a central place and out to many other places. If you imagine a hub. So when I think about the system for information and data in the sector, having a smaller number of core kind of hubs, and then just a plethora of platforms and apps that are custom, where there's lots of competition and there's all kinds of different outlets targeted at different users. And you could see how that would be really healthy for the sector. So that's the kind of systems view we have. And one of GuideStar's strengths, I think, is that it thinks about the system too. And again, that goes back to all the partnerships. So I think it's important that we kind of take a systems view. No matter what, we don't think our investment would cause a consolidation of any kind, and so that's important to note here. So,
and it's worth noting that if you look at the Gates Foundation's grant making in this area, it's very consistent with what Vic just said. That they have made some big bets on a handful of key hubs, but that has not been at the exclusion of supporting innovation on the periphery. And I think we all know that we need that stable common infrastructure, as well as that new radical innovation that we can't even imagine. And so that's all to say that Gates is not being hypocritical at all here. In fact, they are very much walking the talk. And I think it's really great when you see grant making patterns reflect a coherent view of a system the way that I think you see with the Gates Foundation right now.
Great. So 2 questions about overhead myths. So I'm going to put them together a little bit. One says the fundraising ratio is still an influential metric for the public, and so is GuideStar working to address that. And the second is, why do you call it an overhead myth? Why can't overhead be part of how a nonprofit is evaluated?
Yeah. So, let me start that second one. So I think the myth is not that the overhead ratio is the myth is that it is a proxy for performance. And what I mean by that is that the overhead ratio, and the overhead ratio is really broken into 2 pieces. The first question asked about the fundraising ratio, but there's also the administrative cost ratio. But basically just the idea that financial ratios tell you something about performance. Financial ratios do tell you something about an organization, and they can be a mechanism to occasionally filter out those rare cases of fraud or gross mismanagement that we see in the field. But the myth is that tells you something about who is excellent. And it really doesn't at all. And so I very much stand by the framing that's a myth that needs to be busted. And we've been shifting some of our conversation towards using the phrase the overhead solution. And we really think the solution is offering a wide variety of different kinds of data to help people make good decisions, whether they're a donor trying to decide where to give, or a nonprofit trying to find a partner organization, or a journalist writing about a nonprofit and trying to understand it. In all of those cases, we need a wide variety of different kinds of data points. The overhead myth can be, or overhead can be one of those data points. But if we operate in a world where it's the only one, we are betraying the complexity of the nonprofit sector. But as we begin to build this information system that brings data in from many sources, it becomes easier and easier for us to offer many different data points for users to consider when thinking about a nonprofit.
So we have some kudos here, so I just want to pass that on. One, Bunky Ryder, who is one of our development directors, wrote on here, Victoria, thanks for reporting through the Foundation Center site. We all found it useful, so that's great. And then separate, there's some kudos on talking about consolidation for the nonprofit sector. I think people are feeling what you just talked about and excited that we have systems in mind. So I think this is the last question. How will collecting and making diversity data available change the nonprofit sector and the landscape, really?
Yeah.
No simple question.
Yeah, that's no simple question. So we only just launched this new mechanism to collect data about the demographics of nonprofit staff, boards, and volunteers. And I really want to emphasize that it is entirely voluntary. It is simply a mechanism for those cases where it's appropriate. But I think we can agree that at times, nonprofits do not reflect the communities they're trying to serve. This has been a particular challenge in the environmental movement, which, environmental sustainability, the health of our ecosystems affects everyone. And the environmental movement is simply not as racially diverse as the communities that it's trying to serve. And that has been a barrier to it understanding how to do its job well. And this is also true in other parts of the nonprofit sector. So we simply need to understand what our staffs and boards look like, which is not to say that we need to perfectly reflect a given community, because that's not always possible. But we do need to have honest conversations about it. Now, the challenge is it's possible to go too far with this and to get so stuck on these conversations that we're not able to learn and evolve and get better. But we do believe that this is one case where having some good information that's available, that's voluntary, can just help us have some smarter conversations about what nonprofits need to look like in our incredibly diverse world, and how we can ensure that that we both meet the moral challenge of having a diverse nonprofit sector, but also recognize just the practical implications of diversity are that it makes us better. The social science research is quite clear that diverse groups make better decisions. And so we want to have some basic transparency around that. Again, in a voluntary way, we will stumble forward together as we try and figure out how to use this data to all get better at the work that we're trying to do. Vic?
Jacob, I'd just like to jump in and say, not specifically about diversity, but the broader question of data and information and how it's used, because so much of it is about behavior change, and it's about commitment from leadership, and it's about organizational culture. And the data and information alone, whether it's on diversity or performance or overhead, or it's not going to magically change anything. It really comes down to people using it and discussing it, and as a starting place for what does our sector look like and how is it doing. And that's the thing, is that we don't have some of this basic information still. Really basic stuff that we need to start from, and then we'll see where we can go. So that's right. I think GuideStar is a part of that, and we see more and more of it in the sector every day, but it's exciting to see us move forward and catch up a little bit on it.
And we can't, we could do a perfect job providing the data. That doesn't solve any of the problems, whether they're problems of diversity or problems of performance. That relies on others using the data and using it to enrich a conversation, enrich a process of learning, enrich how a community understands itself. And so data is a beginning, it's not an end, but it is an essential beginning to a lot of the hard conversations that we have to face as a field and as a society, but one that, we've shown ourselves capable of doing before, and I think we'll be able to do that again.
Great. So I think we have one final question that is a nice wrap-up for this, which is, congrats to GuideStar for being able to partner with Gates and receive the $3 million, but clearly you have a long way to go, $7 million. Where are your thoughts? Where are you going next? Have you had any good conversations? Kind of what's next?
Yeah. So a great question. And because $3 million is a lot, but $7 million is even more. So what I would say is that, and I can't yet name names, but we have essentially another $1 million mostly wrapped up. We have conversations that are in play that I think will lead to some good things involving another probably $2 million. And those conversations I'm mentioning really probably total more like $4 million, but let's assume that only half of them actually go anywhere. So that would get us to 5. We then have some promising conversations around getting some debt. So we do not assume that all $10 million of this will come in the form of grants. Some of it may come in the form of debt because our business model does allow us to pay back loans, as we've been doing with 2 current loans we have right now from Wells Fargo and the David and Lucille Packard Foundation. So that's another $2 million or so that hopefully we'll be able to get as debt. That gets us up to 7 million total. That flips it. Still leaves 3 million more that we've got to find over the next couple of years. So we've got time. This is a multi-year effort. We have line of sight to most, but not all of it right now.
Great. Any final thoughts, or should we wrap up? Great. Thank you all for being on the impact call with us today. Again, this is our last for this year, but that does not mean it's the last we'll ever have. We have these quarterly, very purposely, so we can talk about our results. So we hope that you will join us on the next call, which is February 23rd at 2 p.m. There's on the, oh, I'm sorry, February 20, no, the next one is February 23rd. Last year's was February 24th. That's confusing.
Okay.
I'm
Great.
sorry.
Oh, yeah, great.
But if you go to npo.gx/impactcall5, you can register. And we do want to encourage you all to take our impact survey. As James mentioned, this is our way to understand how you use GuideStar information for your mission. So that website is npo.gx/impactsurvey2014. Thanks again, and we will be sending you an email with today's presentation and recording in a few days. Have a great day.